Hi, everyone. This is Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And we are now live in our free Facebook group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. And I've got my partner in crime right by me, my little cat, who might be knocking over the camera at any moment now. Hopefully that won't be the case. This is an unscheduled and unannounced Facebook Live. I just wanted to hop on here and just talk about a couple of things and make a couple of announcements and also do a little bit of teaching. So today, the thing that I'm going to teach you is an easy tip to check if your guides are false light entities. And pardon the little bit of shaking. My cat is trying to decide if she's going to settle down now. So before we go to get into that teaching, I just wanted to just share a couple of updates with you. And also I want to give a shout out to anyone who is finding the upload of this video on my YouTube channel later. And even more of a shout out to anyone who is from Jeff Mara's podcast who has found their way over to my channel. I'm getting a lot of help right now over here from the Peanut Gallery. So thanks everybody for being here. And I just got done with being interviewed by Jeff for his Jeff Mara podcast. He has a YouTube channel. So first, for anyone who is not already a subscriber, I want to give you information on how to find him because he's got a really great show. So on YouTube, you can use the search bar and type in Jeff, spelled Jeff, Mara, M-A-R-A, M as in Mary. And he has a lot of really cool videos on there. A lot of interviews of people who have experienced near-death experiences and who've had glimpses of the other side, which is a personal topic of interest for me and has been for many years, which is how I ended up finding his channel. And one of the things that I really appreciate about his channel, not only that he covers the really interesting topic of near-death experiences, but he also covers a variety of other topics and perspectives. And as an open-minded questioner that I am myself, I really appreciate that he has a variety of perspectives. Sometimes different people talking about opposite ideas, opposite views, which I think is really, really cool. So I invite you to go find his channel on YouTube. And today's date, what is today's date? It's the 18th, March 18th, 2023. And my interview is supposed to be up on the evening of March 21st, 2023. So if you're watching this live or, oh my goodness, if you're watching this live or very soon after I post it, then the video my interview will be up on Jeff Mara's podcast on Tuesday evening. So actually the main reason why I wanted to get on here and do a video is I wanted to do a follow-up video just to kind of add a little bit to the interview content. And I also wanted to give a little bit of behind the scenes. So first I'm going to start with some behind the scenes, just so you know. So those of you who watch the interview later, or like if you're some of my online followers or if you're Jeff's followers, sometimes it's fun to learn about some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it can be interesting. So the first thing is, those of you who've been following my stuff for a while know that one of my personal values is authenticity and being really transparent. And so I want to just say that sometimes when I'm on other people's shows, I get nervous. So I feel like I have a whole different energy sometimes when I'm on other people's shows. And it's no reflection on the person who's interviewing me, because like one of the people whose shows I've been on has been a friend of mine for 3 years. And like, and then Jeff today, he's just wonderful to work with and very patient and very calm, very calming. So, that said, there's something about being a guest on someone else's platform, whether it's a YouTube show, podcast, or like whatever it is. It's like, it's just a different energy, and it's just a different energy. It's just a different thing. And so I was a little bit nervous, and I noticed even as I was going, I was like, oh, like I felt like I was putting forth a whole different energy compared to what's normal and natural for me when I'm on Facebook Live or whatever. And so that's just an FYI, like behind the scenes. And it's kind of hilarious because I've probably done over 200 hours of Facebook Lives over the years, and more videos even before Facebook Live existed. So it's just part of human nature and just weirdness, it just is. And it is different to be interviewed than to just get on Facebook Live and just talk. So anyway, thank you for your patience and understanding that, that's just a thing that happens. I was talking to somebody last week who was saying that they have, I think they have their own podcast or something, but they were nervous about calling in to somebody else's show. And I said, oh, like, I totally understand. That totally happens to me too. It's just a thing. So it's okay. And just do it anyway. Just do it anyway. So I was encouraging this person, just go ahead and call in and be a caller on their show. Like, just do it anyway. It's okay. If you mess up or whatever, it doesn't matter. That's actually another one of my values is even if it's imperfect, like, just do it anyway. Just do it anyway. And I believe so much in putting our gifts forth in the world. Whatever your gifts are, I just want to give like a little side teachable moment here. Whatever your gifts are, don't be afraid to share them. Like, you don't have to be perfect. And I'm going to talk in just a minute about some other things that came up during the interview behind the scenes. And I was like, well, that's like, it's going to be way less. I mean, it might end up way less perfect. I don't know how the final recording is going to be, but it's possible that it could be way less perfect than maybe I would like it to be, or then maybe Jeff would like it to be, or that the viewers would like it to be. But you know what? It's so important to get the information out there. It's just important to just get it out there. Like, instead of just scrubbing it and saying, oh, well, never mind. And that was another cool thing. This was my first time meeting Jeff besides just watching his show. And I just loved the fact that even though there was a bit of stuff, some technical isjes, he was like, no, the show must go on, and let's just sit and chill for a minute, and we'll just see if this issue clears out, and then we'll just keep going. Like, we're going to just do it anyway. And I thought that was so cool. So I also wanted to just share another behind the scenes thing that's kind of hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. Was I got up super early this morning, like way early, and interview time wasn't until 9, but I got up at 6. I had some things that I needed to do and I didn't want to be rushed. And then I took a shower, washed my hair, and when I combed my hair, and then I was going to spray like, hair product into my hair. And the bottle that I was using, it's like right at the bottom of the bottle, and the nozzle had, I think it just kind of got all gummy. The nozzle got gummy. So I sprayed my hair, and this like stream went right onto my eyeball. And I was like, ow, ow, oh my God. Like, it makes my eyes water just thinking about it. And I was like crying out in pain, but I was also laughing like, oh yeah, figures. Like, my eyeball is going to be probably bright red during the interview, or I'm going to be like rubbing my eyes the whole time. And I did try to wash it out of my eye. But when we got started doing the interview, I was like, oh my God, the whole time I felt like I wanted to do that. And so it was funny. But probably a lot of people wouldn't even notice that. But it's like, well, the show must go on. Like, red eyes, and like some goofy thing happened this morning that I thought was funny. Because it was like, oh yeah, of course, that's going to happen this morning. Of course, of course, of course. So there was something else that happened that I think is it's a really important teachable moment. And it's important to point out so that everybody knows. So when we were doing the interview, when Jeff was asking me questions and I was telling my story and I was answering questions, after a while, my voice started, he said my voice started to get really staticky and my picture would freeze up. And I looked at my internet signal. It was actually a better internet signal than what I have now. So I immediately, I was like, well, I know what that's about. Because a lot of what I talked about in the interview today was false light entities. I need to get a drink. I don't edit my videos, so you get to see me drinking, petting my cat, rubbing my eyes, and doing all that stuff. And that is just how it is, because it's all authenticity over here. So anyway, I knew what that was about right away, because that is something that happens when there is interference, spiritual interference. Now, this was not the kind of interference that was showing up on my end. Okay. And I don't think it was showing up on Jeff's end either. I think this was more negative spiritual interference showing up in general to garble the message. Like, this message about false light entities is so important, and you better bet that the false light entities that are hanging out in the world, they don't want this information put out in a big way. And Jeff has a pretty big channel. I've watched other YouTube shows as well that in which they're talking about how they had to make like 3 attempts to do a particular interview, and that they knew it was because this is really important information, and there were negative forces that didn't want that information coming forth. And they got that. They understood. So they just kept going forward. So in my professional opinion, as someone who knows all about false light entities and specializes in psychic protection. That is my interpretation of what was going on with the technical issues part of the show. So my hope is that the recording that comes forth that's uploaded to the channel, to Jeff's channel, is going to be the highest and best. And I know that it's just going to be the best that they can do with whatever the recording was. So I just want to ask for patience and grace from everybody who watches it. Maybe it will turn out like great and you can hardly tell. Maybe it won't and it'll be kind of garbled. That was not a reflection of my internet signal, and certainly not a reflection of the amazing skills of Jeff's crew, because it's easy to see that they have that it's easy to see how fantastic they are at editing videos, like way more skilled than I am. So that is what that kind of interference is about. And the thing is that entities, and also specifically false light entities, one of the ways that they will try to interfere is through electronics. And in today's interview, I did talk with Jeff about some of the common indicators that you might be dealing with a false light entity in your own life, or maybe your guides or like your guides are not really your guides, it's a false light entity. And I talked about some of those, but one of the things that I didn't mention is like a big, one of their most common ways that they interfere is through electronics. It's just a very easy means for them to connect with. Like they are essentially electrical energy, so they can affect electrical energy like technology, etc. And I've seen this happen over and over and over again. So it's nothing to be scared about. It just is what it is. It's like, oh yeah, lightning exists, tornadoes exist, like stuff exists. It's just is what it is. So we don't have to freak out about it. Okay. Cause actually you don't ever want to get into fear about this stuff. You want to, just acknowledge like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Okay. And then you just keep moving forward. Okay. And I want to say hi to everybody who's here live. Hi, April. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Lauren. Okay, so I was going to do a tiny bit of teaching, just kind of as a follow-up. I'm going to read a little bit from my book in just a moment, from one of my books. But before I do that, I want to just give a little message to those of you who are watching this, not live, but later on my YouTube channel, specifically those who have found their way over to my channel from Jeff Mara's amazing, wonderful channel. So I just want to say, with empathy and compassion and understanding, that when we first begin to learn that false light entities, something like false light entities exists, it can be a bit mind-blowing, and it can sometimes spin us into a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of maybe existential crisis, or thinking like, like, I don't know what to believe now. How do I trust different spiritual beings that I'm connecting with? And this can be hard. I mean, it's definitely not easy, but it is more important to be informed and making empowered choices, empowered decisions, setting empowered boundaries than it is to not be informed. So sometimes the beginning part of having a new realization can be uncomfortable, but eventually we learn to integrate that new knowledge, and then we're able to make more informed choices. And this issue of false light entities is actually extremely prevalent, which is why I wrote a book about it. And my second book, I have a chapter on it. It's so common. And so it's vital for all of us to know about this. And then once we get over the initial, like, oh my God, feeling, then we can move forward with a little more comfort and ease and self-trust, because we know that we can safely navigate the way. So we've got a couple of comments here, and then I'm going to read to you a little section from my book that actually is I think it's going to be comforting and helpful. It's going to just help you navigate the way a little bit better. Saliv says, I've experienced it, false light, which is why I shut off my mediumship abilities for many years. Yeah, I totally get that. And I completely respect your decision to shut off your mediumship abilities. And I think it's okay for people to do whatever they need to do, in whatever timing. And I also feel like it's okay to open those abilities back up whenever a person feels comfortable doing so. I do understand that some people do shut everything down. And sometimes that might be necessary. But also, it's not going to always be necessary for everyone. Everyone's unique. And as we go through this learning curve of learning how to discern what energies, what entities are what, learning to discern spirits, and then learning to set boundaries with spirits, both of those things. Once we learn those two things, then we can maybe feel a little bit more free, really opening up a little bit more. We can feel a little safer to do that. When I went through the psychic attack that I went through in 2016, that I write about in my first book, Darkness Disguised as Light, I talked about that attack quite a bit in my interview today with Jeff Mara. But when I went through that attack, I actually closed down almost all of my guides because I needed time to discern which ones were safe. And I'm going to read to you about a good process for doing that in just a little bit. But everybody's different. I actually still kept working with two that are my guardian angels that I've been working with for a long time. But previously I had like this big crew, like a whole bunch of guides, random guides that other psychics had told me about that I had, and different things. And I just cleared all of that out, and I decided that less is more until I could figure it out for myself. And then gradually, once I had the confidence and the skills, and I felt okay to do so, then I opened it up to, I consciously chose to bring in some additional spiritual allies at that time. Okay, so now I'm going to read to you from my second book. This book just came out a couple of months ago, and it's called this, look at all the bookmarks. It's called The Psychic Attack Sourcebook, Understanding and Surviving the Unimaginable. And it really is a handbook for people experiencing any kind of unwanted spiritual activity, spiritual targeting, and even people who are practitioners, spiritual practitioners, teachers, guides. In my opinion, you really need to know about this stuff, because at some point you're going to have a client or a student who's going to approach you who is having a weird issue that you don't understand. And you're probably going to feel bad because you are a heart-centered, loving person who wants to help your students and your clients. And you're not going to know how to help them. You're going to just maybe say, have you tried burning sage? Because you don't know what else to tell them. And this book will be really helpful. So if you read it, then you'll have some of this knowledge too. And it also helps you to keep it. It gives you the knowledge so you can know how to hold space in keeping the energy safe for your clients and your students. And then also you'll be able to help people who come your way, you'll be able to help clients and students who come your way who are maybe going through a really unusual experience that's maybe beyond your expertise. Okay, let's get a drink. And then it's reading time. Everyone gather around in a circle. It's time. When I was, it was like 30 years ago, I taught kindergarten, first grade, and second grade for a little while. So every time I get ready to read to you guys, I'm always like, circle time. Okay, this is the Psychic Attack Sourcebook. This is page 173. And this is the chapter on false light. So relax back. I am going to read a couple of pages. I'm going to read 2 pages to you. Okay. And definitely let me know if you have any questions, because right after I read this, I'm going to hop off. So if you have questions, start typing it now. How to check for false light entities. Whether you feel that the spirit of a deceased relative is visiting you, or a spirit guide, angel, or ascended master has arrived to give you a message, it is vitally important that you clarify that they are who they present themselves to be. If you do not take this critical step, the fraudster can gain complete access to your energy field. So it's better to find out, to discern this on the front end rather than later. This imposter entity can then take you down an entire rabbit hole of false messages and delusions. And this does happen. Not to mention that you will likely experience a whole ton of unwanted paranormal interference and possibly even full-out psychic attack. And that is if you end up getting involved. So it's kind of like the same thing as you want to learn how to identify abusive romantic partners. Because it's a lot easier to recognize on the first date that, this person, there are some red flags here. Rather than, oh my goodness, my cat is going to knock everything over. Rather than like getting further and further into the relationship, moving in with the person, and then finding out that when you realize that there's something really wrong with this person and you try to leave, then that's when things can get really bad. Like that's when the abuse can really ramp up. It's really similar. So as I read on, I want to just focus your attention on being empowered and knowing that when you have this knowledge, it helps you stay on the front end so you don't end up in a messier, more difficult situation. Because those difficult situations, they don't sound very pleasant. So let's stay on top of this and avoid this from the beginning. But before I continue reading, if you do find yourself in a messy situation, then it can be really good to have support as you're navigating through it. And that's where I can come in, because it can be really hard to navigate things all on your own, and it can be scarier. And so I do encourage you, if you're going through a difficult situation, to visit my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, and check out the Spiritual Empowerment Academy, because that is exactly for people who are going through the messy stuff. And it's a really safe space where you don't have to feel alone figuring out all this stuff that the other people in your world do not understand, and they don't get it. So they can maybe listen and try to be supportive, but they don't really understand. And so that's what the Spiritual Empowerment Academy is all about. Okay, that was a little sidebar. A psychic attack is likely if you openly invite the shapeshifter into your life. If you have ongoing interactions with it, and then later realize it is false light, and then you try to remove it, the entity will not be happy, and there will usually be angry backlash. So that's why I was saying it's better to get at it from the front end. Let's just not get involved in those abusive relationships in the first place. There is a very straightforward method I recommend for vetting supposed benevolent beings. When encountering a new entity, simply make a powerful proclamation stating that if it is not of the light, genuinely beneficial, and who it presents itself to be, it must leave immediately. Now, let me read that again in case you're taking notes. When encountering a new entity, simply make a powerful proclamation stating that if it is not of the light, genuinely beneficial, and who it presents itself to be, it must leave immediately. A genuinely positive spiritual being will not mind being questioned, and will, in fact, be supportive of your strong, healthy boundaries. An imposter entity, however, will often become angry, hostile, or defensive when presented with your strong declaration. This is a sure sign that you are dealing with a dark entity trying to disguise itself as light. As you develop your discernment, it is also important to have a firm understanding of the signs of false light entities explained earlier in this chapter. And I do explain some of those signs in my interview with Jeff. I do not care if this entity proclaims itself to be the most powerful healer or a herald of knowledge that will save the world. If it is a false light entity, it is not beneficial, period. Once you have determined you are dealing with an imposter, immediately stop all contact with this being. It is a master of deceit, manipulation, and gaslighting. No matter how compelling, convincing, or persistent the communication, do not engage. This is the number one mistake I see people make again and again. Even when they realize they have a trickster entity on their hands, they still keep listening to the entity, believing what it says, and following its orders. Do not engage. Do not listen to the entity. Do not talk to it. Ignore, ignore, ignore. I repeat again, do not engage. As long as you keep interacting with the entity, it will remain firmly hooked into you. It is up to you to go no contact. In addition to this advice, you can also employ some of the clearing tools described in the final chapter of this book. And there are some really great tools laid out in the final chapter. I gave a couple of quick tips in the Jeff Mara podcast as well. That'll help you get started. So do you see the similarities between this and getting involved in an abusive relationship where the abuser tries to act all charming and wonderful in the beginning, and it's only later that the true colors come out, like when you start to set boundaries. And just like with one of those relationships, it is way easier to get out before you've even gotten in. Way easier. So that's my recommendation. And then also to clarify, in Jeff's podcast interview, I talked about the really extreme situation that I had when I was attacked in 2016 and how I became aware of these entities. That was a very extreme situation that happened to be an extremely powerful jinn that was acting as a false light entity, pretending to be a council of angels. And in that case, with it being such a powerful entity, it was a pretty nasty attack. But most of the time, and I've worked with so many people, I can very confidently say this, most of the time, the false light entities that a person might encounter, and they are very common, most of the time they are pretty powerless. They don't have very much power, and that is why they have to use these trickster methods in order to get in. So the key is, if you don't feel comfortable, if you're not totally sure about a guide or whoever spiritual being is showing up, if you're not entirely comfortable or confident that they are safe, then the key is don't let them in. Okay? Because once you've allowed them in and you've allowed them to stay hooked into you for a long time, then some stuff can get kind of stirred up when you try to unhook from them. Okay? But if it's just at the very beginning, when they're first trying to get in, it should be pretty effortless to just set a boundary and say, nope, I am not comfortable working with you. I don't like you. Thanks. Bye. It should be pretty simple. But of course, every situation is unique. So follow your inner guidance. But every false light encounter is definitely not like the situation that I described in my interview with Jeff and that I describe in my book, Darkness Disguised as Light. Most of the encounters that people have where they go into meditation and they feel like a spirit guide is visiting them, that's usually just like a rando entity, not something super powerful. And you just simply say no. It's like you're walking along the street and some random person comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going to be your best friend now, and I'm going to give you advice, and I'm going to tell you what to do in your life. And you look at them and you're like, no. No. I mean, it is possible that you might have a chance encounter with someone walking down the street and you're like, wow, this person is like really cool. I do want to be friends with them. But, you can just say no to that stranger that walks up to you and you just keep on walking. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So I think I'll just close by coming back to empowerment and saying and emphasizing that the empowered approach here is that you are the boss of your own energy. You get to say who has access to your energy. If there's a guide or a so-called guide, like even if there's a guide that is genuine, you have the right to say, no thanks, I don't think I want to work with you at this time. You have the right to choose what people you have in your world, who you spend time with. The same thing is true spiritually. You have the right to choose. And that is an empowered choice. I think that it's just like this common pattern that I see in this spiritual communities, spiritual seekers. This common pattern is like somewhere along the line we've been taught to be passive, to just let in anything that shows up. And I'm not entirely sure where that's come from. Like it could be just a construct of our culture, that in our culture as young children, we're taught that we need to always look to our authorities for instructions on what to do and how to be. Maybe that's why as adults we still do that, because it's just a construct of our society and how we've been raised. But let's change that. That's actually a way to set us up to be victims. It really is. It's a way to set us up. I mean, it might not be intentional, but it does set us up to passively allow ourselves to get involved in abusive relationships, whether it's personal or spiritual. And so let's shift that paradigm. Let's now decide, instead of how we were taught as children, that we should just like look to so-called authority figures, whether it's a guide or an angel or our parents or whatever. Instead of looking toward the authority figure, let's now acknowledge that you are your own authority. You are your authority figure. And you get to choose. You get to choose. So now, perhaps, you have some new information that helps you discern and choose even better. So I hope you have enjoyed this follow-up to my interview. I am creating this before the interview goes live, so just explaining that if you're watching right now and you're like, what? Where's the interview? It's Saturday, the 18th right now, and the interview is going to be up on the 21st, this Tuesday. So if you're watching this ahead of time, I invite you to head over to Jeff Mara's YouTube channel. It's Jeff, Jeff, Mara, M as in Mary, ARA, and he's got some really cool videos on his channel. So go over there and click subscribe and follow, and let's create some mutual supporting him. And then also, if you are a subscriber to Jeff's channel and you found your way to this video, I invite you to subscribe to my channel as well. And definitely leave a comment. Let me know if you have any questions or any thoughts. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day. Sending you all my love.